This panel is Beyond Roe, Redesigning Systems of Equity for Women in Georgia and the United States. And with us we have Beverly Guy Sheftal, Julie K.
Ask
Kai
them to close the
Lindberg,
door. Oh, there we go.
It's okay. They wanted to talk to us too.
Let me repeat that. This panel is Beyond Roe, Redesigning Systems of Equity for Women in Georgia and the United States. We have Beverly Guy Sheftal, Julie K., Kai Lindberg, and this panel will be moderated by Elaine DeLeo. Elaine is the co-founder and director of the Atlanta Design Festival, a festival showcasing the value of design to economic and cultural growth and bringing international awareness to Atlanta's design and creative industries. In 2019, the Atlanta Design Festival was listed as one of the Zine's top 50 design events in the world. Let's welcome Elaine.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us tonight, and I want to thank our panelists. I'm going to ask each of you to do a short introduction of yourselves and some of the highlights of your careers. So, Julie.
That's a tall order, but first of all, just to say thank you, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and love coming to Atlanta, and I'm really appreciative of the French consulate for putting on this event this evening. I'm a human rights lawyer and author. I focus on gender equity and reproductive rights. I have co-authored a book called Controlling Women, What We Must Do Now to Save Reproductive Freedom that came out shortly before the demise of Roe versus Wade. And so I've been working as an activist and attorney to try to restore some of our reproductive rights and to really establish them as human rights.
Kai.
Well, hello everybody. This is late for me. I will let y'all know. I'll start by introducing myself and saying 3 humans traveled through this body, and I still look good. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Georgia. I'm a Detroit native, but call Georgia my home. This subject speaks really intimately to my heart. I'm all about choice. And limiting people's choice really has a significant effect on how they navigate this world. And hopefully this conversation will bring y'all a little closer to the subject. I'll pass it over.
Hello, everybody. I'm Beverly Sheftal. I direct the Women's Research and Resource Center at Spelman College and teach women's studies, where I've been doing that for 52 years. And
That's right.
the thing that I'm happiest about is establishing queer studies at an HBCU and establishing a radical black feminist space at an HBCU.
That's right.
Wonderful. Thank you. So to start out, and just to educate the audience what we're going to be talking tonight about, is that last year in June of 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court officially reversed Roe v. Wade, declaring that the constitutional right to abortion, upheld for nearly a half a century, no longer exists. The decision means that abortion rights and a woman's right to make private decisions about their health care were rolled back in many states, including here in Georgia. And more restrictions are likely to come. Just yesterday, Walgreens made the decision to stop distributing the abortion pill in a number of GOP-led states. I'd like each of you just to share, from the perspective of your own work, how has this decision affected you and the women that you represent?
Well, I guess it's appropriate for me to start off as the lawyer on this, because I think that we depended for far too long on Roe versus Wade and on a legal framework that was doing something for us, but certainly not enough. Roe versus Wade was really established as a right to privacy. It was a decision to be made by a woman with her doctor, who was thought of by the court as a white man in a white coat. And it was not a decision that necessarily allowed abortion access for everybody, but only for those with resources and ability to travel. And so I think when we talk about even the before and with Roe, it's really important to recognize how many women and pregnant people were not able to access abortion, and by that it was teens, people in rural areas, low-income people, and disproportionately women of color who were cut off because of systemic racism and inequities. So, it was the good old days. In many ways, things have certainly gotten significantly worse and disproportionately worse, and particularly for people in sort of the swath of states from West Virginia all the way through Texas, where abortion rights have been so severely limited and really creating a human rights crisis about the ability to decide whether, when, and with whom to have a child or not, and whether to raise that child and have that child in safety with access to health care and prenatal care, which I think our other panelists will talk more about and have lived and have worked in that space. So I think the fall of Roe is kind of the beginning of the next era, and what are we going to do, and what's it going to look like, and who are we going to serve?
Yeah, I'll add to that. So in 2019, our wonderful legislature passed the heartbeat bill. So if you had humans travel through your body or got impregnated, you know that very few of us know that we're pregnant at 6 weeks. And it limits your ability to be able to make choices for your family, right? So this Dobbs decision comes, and unfortunately, it reaffirmed what our legislature had put in place. So it had significant repercussions here in Georgia specifically. Now, thankfully, although it's still in litigation, we were able to get that decision overturned, because at the time when the bill was passed, it was technically unconstitutional. So really excited that we're still advocating for that to be upheld. I think you'll see from a lot of the policies that have been enacted over the last couple of years, they're trying to backpedal, put some protections in place, whether it's postpartum Medicaid, et cetera, but it really doesn't reverse the fact that you're limiting access to care for individuals who may have otherwise not, wanted that pregnancy. And I will say, in real time on the ground, it really hasn't had a lot of repercussions yet, right? But we know with COVID and limited access to care, not only in rural areas, but the AMC just closed, right? So a lot of those safety net hospitals that were there to support young people who have babies, right, they're gone. Prenatal access is limited. So we really have to think about this in a real way, and I'm excited to dive into the discussion a little bit more.
I never think about Roe versus Wade as specifically a gender issue, and I'm very happy that you mentioned that earlier, that Roe versus Wade did not enable many women of color and poor women to have access to abortion. So I always talk about gender issues within the context of race and class. The other thing is I teach young women between the ages of 18 and 22, and it's really, really important to help them to understand what it's like to lose rights to your own body. And I talk specifically to them about my own unwanted pregnancy in college and my illegal abortion. I think it's really, really important for young women to hear, not just read about it in the history books, but I talk very specifically about it, because I want them to understand what it was like for most women in the world and in the U.S. before one had the ability to have a legal, safe abortion. And I say to them, which is very, very surprising, that it was my mother who gave me permission at age 15 or 16 to come to her and say that if you find yourself pregnant, I will take you to Miss Annie Mae's house 2 doors from us so that you can have an abortion. So I talk to them at that level, and then do the kinds of things that professors normally do. And it makes a huge difference, because sometimes it's very, very hard for young boys and girls, young women and men to understand, since legal abortions have been around, what it was like when women died from having an illegal abortion.
Do you want to add anything to that with their legal work?
I think I mean, it's interesting because I often hear from sort of the older generation about younger people, they don't appreciate the rights, they take them for granted. And I think, well, they should take them for granted. They're human rights. They should keep that innate sense of, I get to decide what happens to my body, whether and when. And I'm so struck also in your story of talking about going to somebody local in your community, because I think that that has been an approach that, of communities, in particular of communities of color and Black women, helping others get access to medical services that they have been cut off, either because of hospital closures or just structural racism that means that only a certain percentage of people even get access to health care in this country. And so I'm really struck by that, how we're back where we were. I will say that medication abortion, the abortion pill, has made things much safer for either illegal or gray legal or self-managed care. There's sort of a whole wider range of options. So we are in many ways in a better place because of that. But I think it's so important to keep that at the forefront and to pass those stories and learnings along as part of the educating of younger people of how to frame and think about their rights.
Well, I think about, like in Georgia specifically, it's almost like the dog who finally caught its tail situation, right? So regardless of where you are on the political or ideological spectrum, some of those unintended consequences have permeated in the maternal health space specifically, right? Because we know in Georgia, women, despite racial background, die 3 times as much as anywhere else in the country, right? And then when you put in racial and socioeconomic implications, it's even more grim. So let's just say that you go to the hospital and you have an ectopic pregnancy. What happens then, right? And you've already had to travel 2.5 hours if you live like Valdosta to get services. Well, whose life matters in that moment, right? Do you compromise the life of that sweet baby and that mom? Who makes that choice? And I think some of those hard questions are now being asked of our legislature. Not to mention, you say, okay, well, you can give the child up for foster care. Well, there are kids in hotels because they can't find placements right now. So clearly, if we're going to restrict access to these type of services, then we dang sure better be coming out of some money so that these families can support these babies.
Did you want to add anything,
I
Beverly?
just say, which most people in the room probably know, most of the women who get abortions in the U.S. are Black women and women of color. And it's important to say, which I think a lot of people don't know, that most of the abortions are now done by the pill, by the abortion pill. But you still have to have access to that pill, mainly through mail order or a prescription, which many poor women of color don't have knowledge about. So I just want to say that when we're talking about abortions in the U.S., we are talking primarily about women of color. Majority of us are the ones seeking abortion.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and my question is, well, let's ask why. Like, why are we seeking those abortions? Mm-hmm. And it's for a lot of reasons, right? Whether it's personal, right? Whether it's traumatic, whether it's whatever the case may be. Access to services, a trusted healthcare provider. I mean, I was terrified my first pregnancy. 19 years old, on Medicaid, working at McDonald's. My family, y'all, they Baptists, so they wasn't about that life. I strongly considered it, and my 21-year-old, I guess he cute, but man, oh man, my life wasn't an easy one. So I think that we need to start not only having those conversations about access, but also, why are people making these choices? Why are people making these choices?
I will say I sort of came up, I was a women's studies major early on and came up through the sort of choice movement, and I think those conversations were often not being had about it was the choice to have an abortion. And when we look at Roe versus Wade, even that is framed as the choice whether or not to have an abortion. But what is a choice if you feel that you cannot continue your job, or if there's no child care available, you don't have housing security, you don't have food security? And so we do need to have a much broader conversation, the one that the reproductive justice movement has been having for, decades now. We are in a grim place as far as the legal setting, but I think as far as a movement, we're having more conversations. People are becoming more empowered around talking about what it means that we don't have any paid parental leave in this country. We're the only ones in the industrial countries in the world that don't have that. So if you are thinking, I can't afford to continue this pregnancy, because of an employment situation, that's the American way, and that's not what the women's rights movement wanted. That's not what the abortion rights movement has wanted, is framing the choice. And I think we do have a popular majority in this country that is in favor of access to abortion and under that kind of Roe framework, but we haven't acted and voted like that. And we've talked a lot tonight in earlier panels about voting rights, and certainly we're in a museum that recognizes the importance of that. And I think that's the other piece of this, is the political piece, and how are these issues interrelated. Abortion is not a standalone issue by any means.
Yeah, and I think one of the lazy arguments when you try to talk to those who may be more conservative is like, well, what if someone was raped, right? What if someone, was, I don't know, had on birth control and got pregnant? Whatever the situation may be, and it's all of these very narrow one-off situations that they can easily combat. But what if a family was homeless, right? What if someone was in college going after their degree, and they now have to make the choice, do I live the American dream, go after a career? I'm not ready to start a family. Like, those are the kind of conversations that I think need to start happening more, instead of going to the extremes, right? Let's just say in real time, this is how this situation impacts me, impacts all of us, and unless we radically change the way that we support family units, no matter what the configuration is, then we're going to continue to have folks who seek these type of services, and we have to support that.
Yes. I want to move to the second area we want to talk about a little bit, and that is that, you talked about why are people having abortions, but talking about why are we creating laws and policy that do not allow for women to seek health care and abortions. And all systems are basically by design. We've designed things that we can also redesign. So can you talk a little bit about, from a historical perspective, why we are where we are today? And maybe there's some examples you can present from each of you from your own work.
Yeah, I think I'll start off fairly narrow and leave the broader scope to those qualified with academia. As far as abortion rights, that has been a winning wedge issue for the Republican Party since the 1980s, since Ronald Reagan kind of adopted that as the platform for the Republican Party. It has been a block vote that has really turned out for politicians that are restricting abortion rights, and I think frankly, we were all a little bit asleep at the wheel politically in the states. Democrats who support abortion rights were very focused on the federal level. I think that's changing. If we look at the midterm elections, when and where and how people voted, when it was a straight-out vote on abortion rights, even in Kansas and other places where there were referendums, people were thumbs up, sort of voting yes for abortion rights. It's not always an issue people have put first or have voted enough to support. I think that is changing as people are recognizing what has happened, and also as we recognize how the abortion rights are so interrelated with rights of those who are immigrating, asylum seekers, people who are incarcerated. As we try to criminalize abortion more and more, as opponents try to criminalize abortion more and more, we're merging our healthcare system with a racist criminal justice system, and that is a formula for endangering and ruining the lives of a great many people, and particularly women of color. So, that's sort of the tangible of the voting box all the way to the context that it exists in our country.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I have wisdom next to me, and I never want to, compromise that. But what I will say is, when we even think of the history of obstetrics and gynecology and Dr. Marion Sims, and how he's celebrated for his work by mutilating black bodies, right? And people wonder why black and brown folks have trust issues within our traditional medical system, and that's why, right? We weren't looked at as human in this country. And it's not a shame thing, it's a truth thing. And I think that it's really important for us to move forward to just name it, right? I was not looked at as a human. I was looked at as a test subject and property. And that permeated throughout the years and evolved into systems, whether it's incarceration, whether it's poverty, et cetera. And that's really where it is, at least for me. And I will now turn it over to my dynamic.
I'm more dynamic than you are.
Dynamic.
I have so much to say, but I'm going to restrain myself. But let me just say, because you mentioned J. Marion Sims.
That's
the
right.
Father of gynecology, who experimented on more than 3 enslaved black women. Anyway, but if you ever go to Montgomery, Alabama, and see, of course, the human civil rights place and the Rosa Parks Museum, there is an amazing sculpture of these 3 women that whose names we have. They're Marion Sims operator on it. And I went there a few weeks ago, and I tell you, I thought I could not be moved by much. But standing there in front of those 3 black women who were sculpted by this amazing artist, and to see them and to remember the ways in which black women were experimented on. And we have the nerve to talk about the medical experimentation of Jews during the Holocaust. And we don't talk about the medical experimentation of us. And so if you're in Montgomery, Alabama, go and see that, those sculptures.
And let's just say no pain medication was utilized,
That's
and
right.
many of those weren't pregnant
That's
when
right.
he was doing these horrific
And no
experiments.
anesthesia. No anesthesia.
All right. Well, terrible stories. Let's talk a little bit about where we're headed. You know, what are a few of the meaningful solutions that you think you're seeing now that are changing the situations that we're in with Roe?
Well, I think the most immediate one is access to medication abortion, and there are a lot of really good, strong initiatives starting up, everything from telemedicine, Shield, from legalized states to abortion hostile states to more community centers and outreach for reproductive health care generally. I love being in this human rights center and space, and the history of the civil rights movement and moving us towards a human rights model. The U.S. Constitution was written, by white men, powdered wigs for them. There are some parts of it that are great, and I love it, but it was never written with women and people of color in mind, or if they were in mind, it was not in a good way. And so we need to recognize that and realize that it's time to sort of renovate the Constitution, add a gender equity amendment that recognizes the intersectionality of race and gender, and stop putting things together with privacy arguments and little employment discrimination here, but really to get us to the next stage. And that's not going to happen soon. That's a 20, 30-year plan, but it starts by putting forward initiatives at the state level. It starts by increasing our power through voting rights. I really think that the human rights model that was developed to put responsibility on the state to provide the basic minimum resources so that everybody can have bodily autonomy, can have family security. To me, that's the long-term vision that's really worth fighting for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
Are we okay?
Oh, yeah, we're fine.
Okay. So, yes to all of that, and advocacy and all of those things. And yes, one day I hope that I walk down the street and everyone just sees me, right? And not this beautiful, dark-skinned black woman making assumptions about my character based on stereotypes, right? I would love that one day. And that people won't be so concerned about my vagina. And yes, I said vagina in public. But I think for me, as an advocate and a resource connector for families, it's not immediate enough, right? Like these things are very ideological, very far-fetched in their minds, and I feel like, okay, so you don't want us to get rid of these babies? Well then, like I've been saying, we need money to take care of them. We need to restore midwifery. We need doulas. We need community-based solutions to be able to support these beautiful, sweet little babies coming into this world. And then, if you've had children, you know that if you had all the things, they still suck sometimes, right? And there are sleepless nights, and let's not even talk about the mental toll that it has on you to give yourself so wholly and completely to a little human who really does not care that you have to pee, right? So what kind of mental health supports are we putting in place to support those families? And that's just normal families, right? Not those who are impacted by poverty and unjust systems that pull families apart. So for me, it's like, all right, we want all these babies, then everybody about to come out them pockets so that we can give them the resources that they need to thrive. Not just survive, but thrive.
For me, it's very simple. We need to vote out people who don't have any humanity. And when I think about the evil that is happening in this country by political people, so we need to get them out of office, and we need to get people into office who are pro people of color, pro women, pro gay people, pro immigrants, because we are in deep trouble. I don't think I have ever felt as badly about this country as I'm feeling right now. We are in deep trouble. Fascism is upon us, and if we don't figure out how to get our democracy back, we're going to be in big trouble. The other thing that I'm spending a whole lot of time on is making sure that we have African American studies courses in our schools, and talking about banning books. I mean, so this is what I'm spending my nights doing, writing against the College Board and the governor of Florida and the governor of Texas. We have got to take our country back. Otherwise, we're in big trouble.
Well, if I could just add really quickly, right, that's where my heart breaks, because there is a density of individuals who don't want those things, who hold our legislature hostage based off of the way that we align our voting districts, right? We talk about gerrymandering and all of these things, but a very small portion of this country is holding us hostage, and we need to do something about it. And I think that we can.
I do too.
All right, I think we have time for a question. Does anyone want to join us? I'll give you the mic.
My name is Daxton Pettis. I'm a sophomore philosophy major from Decatur, Georgia. I had a question about, from a legal standpoint, what is the extent of the of human autonomical rights that are in jeopardy because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, well, thank you for your question. And I would say, the way that the Dobbs versus Jackson case was structured is really dangerous, and the court right now is an enormous threat to a range of rights. I think we're going to see a number of decisions coming out, starting with the case against Harvard University around affirmative action. We've seen some awful rulings around guns. Anything that goes in front of this court is going to be a step backwards. Specifically with the Dobbs case, it really started attacking the very underpinnings of these so-called, unenumerated rights, so the right to privacy and everything that is related to it. Contraception was legalized or decriminalized for married folks about 2 years before Roe versus Wade. It's the same, that argument of privacy in the Eisenstadt case. Conceivably, the next case that went up before the court that was a ban on contraception under the same reasoning in Dobbs. So I think the threat of the loss of federal rights is real, but I think we need to keep in check how much this Supreme Court can do. We're talking about in the Dobbs decision, they threw the right back to the states. They did that knowing that about half the states in this country, if not more, are not going to protect abortion rights. So we need to sort of counter with building up state rights and also federal rights to pass federal legislation. But you know, when I started writing the book, it was basically to show that the Supreme Court is not going to save us. They're not that into us. They're not our friends. This court is the worst that we've had in generations. So if I can just say one thing in favor of education, I think, yes, there's a lot of backlash in this country, but the fact that we can fill a room with people on a Saturday night who want to educate themselves on this, and students of philosophy asking legal questions, makes me feel really optimistic about the future and that people care and are thinking about these issues in the right way.
Oh, our time's already up.
Take it the last word. Take the last word.
You can have the last word, yes.
No. The last word, love, y'all. Just love. That's all I'm going to say. Just love.